I don't have a brain tumor, but I'm trying to get inside the head of a man who did. A man who plays God from a Texas tower, randomly taking lives in the first school shooting in American history. Trapped in this machine, you can't help but think about fate. About all the little moments that change your life forever. Like the self-described most hated woman in America, who learns she has less to fear from her sworn enemies than from the people closest to her. Or the millionaire who wakes up one night to find that the woman to whom he's promised the world can't get her hands on it fast enough. Only fate can answer the one question we all eventually end up asking. How the hell did I get here? I'm Marcus Saki. I'm a crime novelist. Cities are more than brick and concrete. They're made of stories. And the best stories are usually about the worst people. Austin. It's unlike any other city in Texas. This town is a little blue dot in a big red state. It's more liberal, more diverse. It stays up a little later and rocks a little harder. In fact, music is so commonplace in this city, it might be the only place in America where being in a band won't get you laid. Want to see a great show any night of the week? Just stroll down 6th Street. Tanya Winch is an Austin singer-songwriter.
This is a town with music everywhere. Music is in this city's blood.
Yeah, it is the blood of the city, as far as I'm concerned. Music is what makes the city kind of pump. It's an enormous part of the culture.
Maybe that's why the culture is so dynamic. The local slogan is, "Keep Austin weird," and everybody pitches in where they can. That weirdness serves as a moat that keeps the city unique. You don't have to go far to remember that you're still in Texas.
Texas may be the only state where you can say, oh, that's not our prison. Our prison's down the road a mile.
I'm heading to a women's prison, which sounds like the beginning of a joke. But the punchline isn't funny. This is a maximum security facility built to house the most dangerous women in America. I'm about to sit down with one of them and hear her side of one very up story. A tale of sex and greed and murder. A real-life episode of Dallas that takes place in Austin. On the night of October 2nd, 1999, a woman tiptoes through the darkened halls of a mansion. Her heart is racing. Her hands are sweaty. Her shotgun is loaded. She stands over the sleeping figure of a man named Stephen Beard and blows his stomach out. Let me back up a few years. Stephen Beard is a self-made millionaire, recently widowed. In the mid-90s, he meets a waitress named Celeste, who's less than half his age. A few months later, Celeste and her twin daughters move in. Classic story, right? Young woman marries an old rich guy. Rhymes with schmoldfigure. But this is Texas, so the story is bigger. And Austin, so the story is weirder. Catherine Casey is the author of She Wanted It All, a true story of sex, murder, and a Texas millionaire.
So she had him tagged as a mark from the beginning.
She saw that this was somebody who maybe could finally give her everything she wanted. I mean, he was building mansions for her and giving her jewels, and in no time at all, she was having an affair with her ex-husband.
Celeste adapts well to her sudden wealth.
Yeah, she had room for 500 shoes in her closet. And she once spent $7,000 on throw pillows for the living room.
She's compulsive.
She would not have been happy until all the money was gone.
For a while, Stephen Beard puts up with the spending. He tries to make their marriage work. He adopts her daughters and even turns a blind eye on the affair with her ex. But eventually, he reaches his breaking point. He threatens divorce. Celeste threatens to kill herself. Stephen admits her to a psychiatric hospital. There she meets a woman named Tracy Tarleton, who's immediately smitten.
Tell me about their relationship, because I can't decode whether or not it was ever romantic for Celeste. I believe it was for Tracy.
I don't believe she ever loved Tracy, but I think what she saw in Tracy was another person who fell quickly in love with her and idolized her and would do anything for her.
They start spending a lot of time together, and as Celeste grows closer to Tracy, her marriage becomes less stable and less convenient. If Stephen leaves Celeste, she's back to being a waitress. But if he dies, she gets everything. And Tracy's affection and loyalty are just what Celeste needs to make that happen. First, Celeste tries mixing Everclear in Stephen's vodka, grinding sleeping pills in his mashed potatoes. Like absurd characters in a Coen Brothers film, Tracy even tries to grow botulism in a jar, which Celeste feeds her husband on a chili dog. It doesn't even give him indigestion. Then, on the night of October 2nd, 1999, Stephen Beard goes to bed alone. Celeste, as usual, is sleeping in her daughter's room. That night, a woman tiptoes through the darkened halls with a loaded shotgun. She stands over the sleeping figure of Stephen Beard and pulls the trigger. This is the actual 911 call.
What is going on there?
My gut just jumped out of my stomach.
Out of your
They blew out. Yeah, they blew out of my stomach.
I'm having a hard time figuring out what happened.
I don't know what happened. I've never had this happen before.
Stephen is in shock. His wounds are massive. After all, a shotgun was fired into his belly at close range by Tracy Tarleton. Gary Cobb is an assistant district attorney who helped prosecute the case.
Early on, they identified who the actual shooter was.
Tracy Tarleton.
Tracy Tarleton. They were able to recover the weapon, so we knew her involvement in it. And
Yeah, that was a Keystone Cops murder. That was the
oh yeah, it was very incompetently done.
Celeste must have used Tracy's absolute trust and faith in her.
She used her absolute love, and that's the key thing.
On the floor near the bed, police find the ejected shell. When they compare it to Tracy's shotgun, they know they have their shooter. It doesn't make sense to anyone, though. Why would Tracy do this? They grill her hard, but she won't talk. Stephen Beard survives for several months, but eventually succumbs to infection. Celeste doesn't seem broken up. In fact, on the way to the funeral, she allegedly stops to gloat to one of her husband's tenants, only to arrive at the cemetery weeping. She also keeps calling Tracy, who's charged with murdering her husband. Police believe Celeste is involved, but they can't prove it so long as Tracy keeps her mouth shut, which she does, even when she finds out Celeste tried to hire a hitman to kill her. But then she learns that Celeste has gotten married again for the 5th time, and Tracy has an epiphany. She's been used. She tells the cops everything, how Celeste begged her to do it, gave her the layout of the house, left the door open. The trial is a slam dunk. Tracy isn't the only one who testifies. A whole bunch of people join her, including Celeste's daughters.
So they didn't have a regular loving mother-daughter relationship. You know, it was more like one of those mothers who one day might eat her young.
Yeah, the defense basically came out with their argument was just Tracy's crazy, right?
Tracy's crazy. She wanted a relationship, but there was no relationship, which was great for us because we knew without any doubt that we could establish a relationship.
They could, and they do. Tracy's plea bargain limits her jail time. But Celeste, she gets a pair of life sentences. Now I'm going to visit her in prison. And I have to tell you, as a novelist, this is a big deal. I have no idea what to expect. I'm not even sure why she would agree to meet with me. Who is this woman? Is she the Black Widow everyone says, or is there more to the story? I'm about to find out.
I'm only about an hour and a half out of Austin, but it's a whole different world. You're in Texas now, son.
I'm heading to a maximum security prison to talk to a woman named Celeste Beard. She's serving 2 life sentences for conspiring with her lover, Tracy Tarleton, to murder Celeste's millionaire husband. If what I've been told is true, she's a sociopath who plays people like instruments.
We want to believe people, and especially, you know, kind of vulnerable acting women. And she knew how to play that up.
Celeste Beard is an extremely manipulative, selfish, self-centered person. She's extremely greedy.
Do you think there's any chance that she's innocent?
No chance at all. 0 chance that she's innocent.
The evidence supports that, but I'm not a lawyer. I'm a novelist, a storyteller. My goal is to understand her. Is she a cold, heartless creature? A brutal killer?
This is weird.
Who is Celeste Beard?
What's the interview for, anyway?
Things start off strange right away because she knows the answer. It's not like you can just drop into a maximum security prison.
There's been a lot said about you, and to start with, I'd be curious who you are.
I don't even know anymore. I've been incarcerated almost 10 years, so I don't even know.
What was your relationship with Stephen like? Was it a happy marriage?
It was a different marriage, but I mean, what's happy?
You loved your husband?
Yes, I did. But now I live in an area smaller than my shoe closet, so I have a lot of time to think about all the bad choices that I made.
I'm going to tell you everything I'm feeling through this. Right now, I'm conflicted. She's not what I expected. She seems so vulnerable. As a man, my DNA wants to protect her. But I've seen the evidence, too.
Where did you meet Tracy?
The psychiatric hospital.
Did you and she have a relationship?
No, just a friendship.
There was no hint of it being romantic?
No.
There are a lot of people who say that they saw the two of you together, that you were, at parties and dancing.
I mean, I only knew her a short 6 months before she shot Stephen. I wouldn't think that we spent, all that much time together.
So you guys really weren't close to that level?
Well, I mean, I thought we were, but after all this happened, obviously we weren't, because I didn't know anything about her.
Okay, she contradicted herself. First they're good friends, and now she doesn't know anything about Tracy. But that could be a figure of speech. What's troubling me is that despite the sincerity in her eyes, what she's saying isn't true. She and Tracy were seen kissing and even going to bed together. Celeste bought her a wedding ring. Hell, they went to couples counseling.
I was convicted because I had an affair. I wasn't even convicted on any evidence.
Actually, the prosecution presented a mountain of evidence. Just one example? After Tracy shot Stephen, Celeste continued to call her from a secret cell phone, and the prosecution had phone records. What wife repeatedly calls the woman who shot her husband? I asked her.
This interview's over.
I'm just trying to give a chance for you to say what happened.
I don't really care. This interview's over.
This is the first time she walks out, but not the last. One thing you should know is that Celeste is free to go back to her cell anytime. Instead, she lingers just out of sight. This feels like a game.
I mean, if you're innocent, I would think if nothing else, you'd kind of like to be heard. Would you like to respond to it?
The jury didn't like me, so they threw me in here for life. So yeah, I'm pretty upset about that, especially when she's here, stuck me here because why? Because I wouldn't be your girlfriend. I didn't come running to you after you shot my husband. That's why I'm in here, because she's getting her revenge on me.
It's a pretty heavy revenge.
Yeah, which maybe explains why she had a double mastectomy. The karma fairy took a breast off for each one of my life sentences.
Wow. So much for the shy, vulnerable girl who walked in.
What evidence would you like to present that's for you? I mean, what are the things that help clear your name?
I didn't do it. The walkthrough that Tracy said at the house was bull. I mean, it's ridiculous. They have all these letters that I supposedly wrote on the computer, but they're anonymous. I mean, what kind of judge lets anonymous letters come in as evidence?
Where did they find those letters?
Supposedly off of my computer.
Do you think you're a good person, Celeste?
No, I mean, now, yeah, I guess. I mean, I don't do anything, but then, no, I wasn't. I gave everything to everybody. Yeah, I spent a lot of money, but not all of it was on me.
Look, I get it. It's easy to feel sorry for her. We're genetically conditioned to. But the number of people who would have to be lying is mind-boggling. Not just Tracy, but friends, cops, lawyers, doctors, bankers, therapists, jewelers, travel agents, reporters, nurses, hairdressers, her stepchildren, and her own daughters. The prosecution called 46 witnesses. If you believe Celeste, all 46 lied.
I started looking into this without preconceived notions, but The entire case and everyone I've spoken to say that it's absolutely positively on you. Do you,
Who
is
have
there
you
anything
spoken
that
to?
you can raise
Who have you
that changes
spoken
that?
with? Okay. Right. That's it. Okay, I'm gonna do
This isn't quite the end of the interview. Again, she lingers in the hall.
Celeste, I'm just asking if you want to come and say anything specific that clears you.
I don't give a damn what you think about anything. I know that I'm innocent. I don't care what evidence you think. They should have put it in court.
They did.
Whatever.
Even here, you've done nothing but blame everybody else.
Whatever. You must be a homo too.
Can't argue with that logic.
I came here to meet the real Celeste. Not sure if I did. To be honest, I'm not convinced there is one. You play life like a game for long enough, and you forget that it's real. And while I believe that she regrets her past, I think it's mostly because of the future she faces. I started out by saying I would tell you everything I was feeling. So here's what you feel when you leave a prison. Grateful. Our lives are sparkling treasures. They're ours to celebrate or to ruin. And before Celeste, there was another Austin woman that faced ruin. But she did it proudly, reveling in her position as the most hated woman in America. That is, until she found herself at the center of a horrifying crime. I'm going to tell you a story about the most hated woman in America. For 35 years, Madalyn Murray O'Hair leads a one-woman war against faith. She roundly dismisses religion as supernatural nonsense. O'Hair doesn't just climb on a soapbox. She mounts that sucker and bellows.
Do we feel that our movement for recognition of atheism has a prayer? We do not. But do you think this is going to make me shut up?
Then, in 1995, she suddenly vanishes, along with her son and granddaughter. There's no forced entry or signs of violence. Her safe is empty, and $600,000 have been drained from an overseas bank account. At a glance, it seems like she's cleaned out her organization's coffers and left the country. But there's reason to suspect more. You don't act as God's noisiest critic without making enemies. Lots of enemies.
Don't touch me.
Larry Wright is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and a stunning writer. He published a long profile of O'Hair in Texas Monthly.
There was a lot of her ideals and her energy that I really admire. But she was also such a big character.
Oh, she was a huge pain in the ass. You can't gloss over it. She was vain, selfish narcissist who rampaged across the country. But she managed to provoke a lot of argument in the country. Mm-hmm. And some of it wasn't bad argument to have.
What was your impression of her when you met her personally?
A windbag, very self-important. I just felt like I was in a fire hose of words, just a torrent.
O'Hair's rise to infamy starts in Baltimore in 1960 with a lawsuit saying that her son shouldn't be forced to pray in school.
When I am forced or my children are forced to assume a religious posture in a public school, this is a violation of my particular human right.
The Supreme Court rules in her favor. Instantly, she becomes a target. O'Hair receives photos of her family smeared with feces. Her son's cat is strangled. Her home is actually stoned. In 1963, after assaulting a group of police officers, there's never a dull moment with this woman, she flees Baltimore for Austin. Here she founds American Atheists and runs the organization with her son John and granddaughter Robin. Honestly, I'm fascinated by her. Most of us will do anything to be liked, but Madalyn chose life as a professional antagonist. I mean, she didn't set up her little shop of atheists in Berkeley. She did it in Texas. The big-ass buckle on the Bible Belt. You gotta admire that kind of chutzpah. One of her outlets was a local TV show.
Hello there, I'm Madalyn Murray O'Hair, back again with the American Atheist Forum.
Today, that tradition is maintained by the staff of The Atheist Experience, a long-running and award-winning cable access show.
Is Texas a hard place to be an atheist?
Texas as a whole, yes.
Austin isn't. Austin's a pretty open-minded city with a lot of diversity here.
Is there a political goal? I mean, are you guys shooting to accomplish something politically?
With regard to atheism, there's no tenets, no dogma, no rituals, no governing body. It's simply the rejection of theistic claims.
For example, science education taken over faith, getting people to think critically. That's something that most atheists would all agree with.
I'm thinking about someone like Madalyn Murray O'Hair, who took that to an aggressively politicized level. Is that part of it to you?
I think that the main benefit of Madalyn Murray O'Hair in her time was to shock people and to make people aware of atheism. She was a lightning rod, and she was famous.
O'Hair plays that role for decades. By 1995, the public is paying less attention, but she hasn't slowed down. That August is a busy one for Madalyn. The Pope is coming to America, and she has plans to see him. I'm guessing she wasn't after a blessing, but it doesn't matter. She won't make it. Because it turns out that her worst enemies are standing on her doorstep. And here's the real twist. The men who come for her aren't the ones she's expecting. In 1995, Madalyn Murray O'Hair, the founder of American Atheists, the most hated woman in America, vanishes from Austin, Texas, along with her son, her granddaughter, and a boatload of cash. At the time, people think she cleaned out her organization and left the country. But the truth is a lot more horrifying. Not long before going missing, Madalyn O'Hair hires a new office manager. David Waters is recently out of prison. It's not clear if O'Hair knows that, but the truth is, she probably wouldn't have cared. She's Madalyn O'Hair, and she'll hire who she likes. But David Waters isn't your run-of-the-mill ex-con. He kicked a kid to death when he was 16 years old. He's not just brutal, though. He's also cunning, and he sees that there's money to be had here.
He learned that, for instance, they had bearer bonds that they were holding. There was a gold chain that was in the safe that didn't have a combination lock that worked.
Ed Martin was an investigator with the Internal Revenue Service. Why am I getting this story from an accountant instead of a cop? Well, you'll have to wait for the answer to that one.
And he also discovered that there were documents suggesting that the O'Hairs might be trying to flee to New Zealand at some point.
They had moved about $600,000 in American money to New Zealand with the idea that they were going to follow that money.
Waters begins stealing almost immediately, but he's reckless, and Madalyn catches him. She doesn't just fire him, she publicly humiliates him in a newsletter to thousands of followers. It's a bad move. Just because you're smarter than the bear doesn't mean taunting him is a good idea. And in August of 1995, David Waters goes to her office, along with convicted rapist Gary Carr and a loudmouth named Danny Fry. They snatch Madalyn, her son John, and granddaughter Robin. As cover, they force John to sign a note saying the O'Hairs will be gone for 2 weeks. Never mind that they didn't mention traveling plans, or that Madalyn is supposed to appear in New Jersey, or that her dogs are left without food. And yet, despite 1,000 obvious flaws, no one raises an eyebrow, the police least of all. It's amazing. Madalyn Murray O'Hair is one of the most influential American women of the last century, and yet when she vanishes without a trace, no one seems to care. Now, the kidnappers are after the big score, $600,000. With the O'Hairs stashed in a hotel, Waters orders John to transfer the money from New Zealand. When the money finally hits, David Waters launders it by buying gold coins. And then the tragic, obvious thing happens. Madalyn's son, John, is a big guy and fights back, but Waters and Carr are able to choke him to death with a belt. Next, they murder Robin and Madalyn. And after the injury, the insult.
So the next morning, they take those bodies to a warehouse. They close the doors, go have breakfast, then come back, and they're going to cut the bodies up.
I gotta say, I think I might have held off on breakfast before dismembering a dead body.
Yeah, well, this is the kind of brutal people they were. So they take the bodies from here and go to Camp Wood with it, and they found this place to dig. And then they just drive up the van right up to the hole and dump the bodies out the van.
Like her or hate her, Madalyn Murray O'Hair deserves better than this. Everyone does. David Waters doesn't care. He has his revenge and a fortune in gold coins. But the funny thing is, The wheel, it never stops turning.
What happens to the gold?
The gold goes and gets put into a small 5x5 warehouse.
Just a little storage
It's
facility.
a storage facility. The trouble with that is that a $5 lock was put on $500,000 worth of gold. Okay? So,
You gotta be kidding me.
No.
Sometimes you want to club Karma right between the eyes. And sometimes you want to kiss her on the lips. What happens next is unbearably perfect. A crew of dirtbags, with no connection to the crime, is using a master key to open storage lockers. Usually they find crappy TVs and old clothes. This time, they get $500,000 in gold coins.
It's so ridiculous. All that Waters and Carr went through, all that O'Hare and her family endured, comes down to this suitcase full of gold, which gets stolen by a couple of yahoos who have no idea what they're picking up.
Exactly.
It's kind of funny in a story where we're talking about an atheist that there's this weird fate component that messes up the people who killed her.
The earth and karma, like you said, kind of has an ability to right itself, you know?
And karma's not done with David Waters. See, very few people buy actual gold. If you pick up $600,000 in coins, somebody's likely to notice. In this case, that somebody is Ed Martin of the IRS.
I mean, you were checking money laundering. This is pretty clearly
It's converted to personal use, yes. I mean, this is money that belongs to this organization. It's then converted to gold. The organization doesn't have any need for gold.
Right. Especially physical gold.
Physical gold.
So Ed follows the money, which leads to the gold, which eventually leads to David Waters, who's doing a long stint for kidnapping and murder.
Thank God criminals are stupid.
It's amazing to me, too.
As dumb as the killers are, I have to wonder about everyone else. Why did it take an IRS agent to find men who murdered one of the most famous women in America? The answer is kind of sad.
Nobody really cared.
Nobody
It
seemed to
seemed like,
care.
yeah, she was gone, okay.
Even her organization.
Isn't that interesting? It tells you a lot.
It does.
She was a difficult person.
And that's the heart of it. The truth is, I admire a lot of things about Madeline. She was an important woman who started a critical conversation in this country. But she was also an unbearable person. So much so that when she went missing, hardly anyone cared enough to look for her.
You don't like that?
It's hard not to see a kind of fateful irony in this story. Madeline Murray O'Hare had more enemies than any woman in America. But it wasn't a grand cause that ended her. It was simple, old-fashioned greed. Of course, Austin is no stranger to fate. And in 1966, one man would reshape the destiny of the whole city. Let's talk about fate. I don't mean a plan in a celestial book. For me, fate's about the past. It's a way to ascribe meaning to a meaningless sequence of events. Look, our choices shape our lives, but there are a million cosmic coin flips in play too. Fate is the alarm clock that didn't go off, the bus you didn't catch, the turn left instead of right. Fate can be the throwaway moment that ends up defining your life, the way you meet your spouse or find your passion, lose your sister. Fate can be a bomb growing in the head of an ex-Marine.
I'm not haunted by it, no. But it did take me several years to work through why I was still alive and so many other people were not.
This is Cheryl Botts. In the summer of 1966, she's on the way to visit her grandmother. At the train station, a University of Texas student asks her on a date, and she accepts. Cheryl couldn't have known it, but a cosmic coin just flipped. On August 1st, her date takes her to the observation deck of the UT Tower. They chat and take in the view. They're about to go when Cheryl spots some maps she wants to look at, and they stay another 10 minutes. Then they step back inside the tower.
The first thing I noticed was the receptionist was not at her desk. And I noticed there's a reddish-brown swath across the floor. Looked like varnish, and we both stepped over it. There was a movement to the right, and there was a man bending over the couch, and he had a rifle in each hand. And he just stood there. I think he was as shocked as we were. And I know people always say, He didn't think anything was weird, but we never stopped walking.
Sure.
And when I saw him, I literally just smiled and said hi, and he smiled and said hello. And we just kept walking.
No, I can see that. Everything is... Who's thinking, wow, I bet that kid is about to start shooting strangers?
Yes.
That kid is named Charles Whitman. While Cheryl was on the observation deck, Whitman had beaten the receptionist to death. That reddish-brown swath is her blood. Whitman has just hidden her body when Cheryl comes down the steps. And moments after she walks away, he begins a killing spree from the top of the tower that marks the darkest day in Austin history. 16 people die. 31 more are wounded. But Cheryl comes face to face with Whitman and doesn't have a scratch.
If we'd gone in earlier, he would have been beating up the receptionist. If we'd gone in later, he probably would have been about to come out on the deck. So either decision would have made probably a difference of life and death.
A minute in either direction, we're not having this conversation.
Right, that's exactly right.
Charles Whitman is raised in a well-off but messed up family. His mother is extremely religious. His father is extremely abusive. His parents are so strict that Charles decides he'd have an easier life in the Marines. But he doesn't fit there either. He's court-martialed and discharged in 1964. He and his new bride moved to Austin. But what his wife couldn't know is there are two men behind that handsome face. There's the smart, buttoned-down Charles, who learned discipline from his parents and from the Corps. And there's the unpredictable Charlie, who threatened his fellow Marines and once cleaned a deer carcass in his dorm room. It's Charlie Whitman, the dark twin, who stands on the University of Texas Tower. Let's flip another coin. Imagine you're walking through an Austin morning. One route is short, the other pretty. You decide to save time. After all, it's 102 degrees, and you're drenched in sweat. You're thinking about lunch and where to have it. Then your chest explodes. There's a gun blast, but you never hear it. It's too far away. You never even feel the pain. Oblivion comes too quick. You're just dead. Gone. Because you went left instead of right. That's the power Charlie Whitman is wielding. From the 28th floor of the tower, Whitman will make kill shots at 500 yards. To find out just how difficult that would be, I head out to Lone Star Gun Range, where firearms expert Ross Bransford has gathered the same arsenal Whitman had.
Ross, this is a lot of firepower. While the scope is more modern, this weapon is essentially what Charles Whitman was
You have in
shooting
your
with.
hands what he would have been using.
He's on the 28th floor, so he's firing down at a pretty severe angle where gravity's going to be working for him. It's pretty incredible accuracy nonetheless.
It is phenomenal accuracy.
He'd earned the sharpshooter badge in the Marines.
Then he probably had what it takes as far as the training and understanding of the operation of the firearm.
Can I shoot these?
Absolutely.
I want to see what he was
That's
doing.
what you're here for.
That target is 100 yards away, the length of a football field. Through the scope, I can see it clearly, but the tiniest motion throws the image off by feet. I can't imagine how hard this would be with people shooting back, and more important, when you're aiming at a living person.
It's a lot harder than it is in a video game. Not bad for a novelist, right?
Normally, I like firing guns. But then, normally, I'm not imagining shooting people. Whitman is. For months before his spree, he has increasingly violent fantasies. He writes about them in his journal. He even sees a therapist. But he can't find answers. His dark twin Charlie grows stronger and stronger. Finally, one night he writes a note. In it, he confesses to killing his mother and his wife. After he finishes, he gets up and kills his mother and his wife. His dark twin consumes him. The next morning, Charlie Whitman arms himself for war. He packs a scoped hunting rifle, a carbine, a sawed-off shotgun. He puts on a pair of overalls and, pretending to be a maintenance man, climbs to the top of the tower. He kills the receptionist, says hello to a pretty young woman named Cheryl Botts, barricades the door behind her, then steps onto the observation deck. He braces his rifle and stares down the scope. A woman walks through the crosshairs. She's pregnant. Charlie exhales slow, then squeezes the trigger. Then he moves to his next target, and his next.
when Charles Whitman went up in the tower and started shooting? Were you just on patrol?
I was getting my equipment ready for the 3 o'clock work schedule. I was polishing my boots when I heard a special bulletin. A person was on top of the University of Texas Tower shooting with a rifle.
Ray Martinez retired as an elite Texas Ranger. In 1966, he's an Austin cop. And if his radio hadn't been on that afternoon, our history would be different. Did you hear the coin flip?
Of course, as a cop, when you hear that regular people are supposed to stay away from the tower, that means you're supposed to go there.
Well, that is correct. And when I got out of my car, I could hear all kinds of fire shootings, and sirens. It sounded like a war.
Remember, this is Texas. A bunch of civilians have guns. They've taken cover and are returning fire at Charlie Whitman. It's like a scene from the Wild West. Hell, it is the Wild West. The UT Tower stands in the center of campus, and at the time, dominates the Austin skyline. Whitman has the high ground and near perfect cover. The air is alive with bullets.
Are you running here? Are you dodging from cover to cover?
My theory was that if I could see the top of the tower, the guy could see me,
It's
vice versa.
good theory.
So I looked up at the tower and I said, well, there's only one damn thing to do.
Ray assumes there's an assault team on the way. What he doesn't realize is that he is the assault team. Sprinting as fast as he can across the field of fire, Ray makes it inside the tower. Now he's in a position most of us will never face. For Ray, right this second, fate isn't invisible. It's directly in front of him, waiting. In the elevator, he watches the floor numbers change. He says a prayer. He draws his gun. Ray Martinez is about to face his fate. August 1st, 1966. A former Marine who's been suffering increasingly violent fantasies stands atop the University of Texas Tower, staring down the barrel of a rifle. His name is Charlie Whitman, and by the end of the day, he will have murdered 16 people and wounded 31 others. It's the first, but sadly not the last, mass school shooting in American history. He is calm and methodical and very skilled. He hits his targets, some of them from hundreds of yards. Every bullet from his gun is a skeletal finger of fate. At that same moment, an Austin cop named Ray Martinez steps off the tower elevator. He has his own rendezvous with fate. He's determined to bring Whitman down, no matter the cost.
All you gotta do, you got tunnel vision. You just put everything else out of your mind.
On the 27th floor, Martinez meets a civilian with a rifle. Like I said, this is Texas.
He said, "Are we playing for keeps?" I looked at him, I said, "You're damn right we are." And he says, "Well, you better deputize me." So we had a very formal ceremony there. I said, "Consider yourself deputized."
The two go after the shooter. The entrance to the observation deck is jammed. Ray hurls himself against it until the door gives. It's not just Whitman they need to worry about. Cops and civilians on the ground are shooting at them too, and coming damn close. Remember, this is 1966. Cops didn't carry portable radios. Once Ray Martinez left his car, he was out of contact with the rest of the force. The observation deck is a balcony on all four sides of the tower. Ray knows the shooter is here. He doesn't know where. He has his civilian partner watch one direction, and then he starts off in the other.
I looked to my right, to the corner, and I couldn't see anybody, so I said, I'm going to have to go around the corner over here to look to the other side so that I could see if he's there.
After rounding the first corner, Ray hears something. It's another cop, Officer Houston McCoy. McCoy himself is a welcome sight, but the shotgun he's carrying? Well, that's about the most beautiful thing Ray Martinez has ever seen. Ray and McCoy edge along the balcony. They reach the corner. Heart pounding, Ray leans around him and spots Charlie Whitman.
He had an M1 carbine, and he was aiming like he was going to shoot somebody. And right away, I fired at him. I was duck walking, because I had to stay down. And
You're shooting the whole way.
Shooting at him. And I know that I hit him because his rifle kept going up, and McCoy shot him with a shotgun. And my gun was empty. I dropped my gun and I reached back and I took the shotgun from McCoy and I went and shot him one more time. And that was the end of it.
Charlie Whitman cut the threads of 16 lives. People whose only mistake was not lingering over breakfast, not skipping class, not going left instead of right. But what twist of fate made Charlie Whitman do it? Was he aware of the cosmic coin flips that led him here? His journals show a troubled man. He even leaves a note asking that an autopsy be performed on him. And when doctors do, deep in his brain, they find a malignant tumor the size of a lime. This is troubling to me. Can a massive tissue be a permission slip for multiple murder? Can our fate be written by a clump of cells? I asked Dr. David Morledge of the Imaging Research Center to help me understand.
This was a very serious tumor.
Yes, it was.
I don't mean to be insensitive to his condition, but does that explain his actions?
No. He had a problem with controlling his temper. He had multiple rages. So we would call that in this day and age maybe a borderline personality or even antisocial. So you put that on top of a tumor that's growing in his brain, and it's a formula for a bad outcome.
He was badly wired to begin with, and then this tumor, magnified the feelings?
Correct. Amplified all of his negative tendencies.
I have just one more question. Where does fate come into all this?
What Charles Whitman did, was it his fault?
Absolutely.
So even with all of these things going on in your head, there is still free will, for lack of a better word.
Exactly, yes.
If there's any reason to feel sorry for Charles Whitman, it's that even though he suspected there was something wrong with his head, in 1966, there was nothing anyone could have done. He was a dead man regardless. But he didn't have to go up on that tower. And if you'll forgive me for saying it, him forever for making that choice. Still, Austin doesn't dwell on Charles Whitman. If the city's taken anything from him, it's a lesson about fate, about the need to cherish every moment. This is a town with a zest for life. It's a passionate place where weirdness isn't just accepted, it's encouraged. Maybe Whitman is part of the reason. Because when you learn everything can be taken from you in an instant, you celebrate life a little bit more. Cheer a little harder. Sing a little louder.